Hello and welcome to video 4 of our series. Today we're going to be talking about some specifics of the Georgia standards of teaching. We're going to be walking through specifically the creating category within middle school standards. We'll talk about the composition and mostly the improvisation section. This section of the standards focuses mostly on the creative side of musical training. So instead of learning concepts and memorizing terms or vocabulary, students are doing a little bit of that, but then applying it in a creative way where they're able to build new material and make things their own. These requirements are obviously a little bit different based on the grade level that the students are at. So whether it's 6th, 7th, or 8th grade for middle schoolers. In 6th grade, students are asked to write short melodies and put together rhythms on unpitched percussion instruments. An example of an applicable lesson plan would be a lesson where students are given a set of rhythmic combinations. So it could be 2 quarter notes and then a half note, and then they could have 3 eighth notes and an eighth note rest, or some kind of combination like that. Then they would be asked to combine those combinations that they've already been given into a new set of combinations. So these would be an original set of measures rhythmically. The following day, students might be asked to come up with totally new combinations. So this builds new skills slowly, never lets students feel like they are drowning in unfamiliar territory. Combining known material into new material teaches students to slowly develop the ability to devise music they've never heard before. When 6th graders are able to open up this kind of thinking, they're training their brains in new ways. So this is intended to transition them into the skills that they will use in 7th and 8th grade. So that brings us to 7th grade. In 7th grade, students are asked to improvise simple harmonic accompaniments using chords such as the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 5/7. For example, I could give my students an assignment with a piece of paper containing a simple melodic line in the treble clef. Then I could ask my students to accompany that melody line with chords of their own choosing. Because of the nature of music theory, students would have really obvious options. So if we were in the key of C and students were given a melody line with an E, a G, or a C, a really obvious example would just be to choose that root chord that matches with the melody line that is given. They also, though, could be more creative and add harmonies that aren't as obvious. So maybe a student is feeling kind of experimental and they want to put a 5 chord with that E or that C. If it was the G, obviously that G would be present in the 1 chord and the 5 chord. But this is a really great way for students to stretch their brains and think about notes and harmonies that go well together. Those would be concepts that had been covered in class already, perhaps in the theory days or any of those other concepts that we've gone over. So this kind of assignment would be super helpful for students that are pretty far accelerated and are grasping things and ready to apply those things. But it also could be helpful for students that may be struggling a little bit more or a little bit behind some of their classmates, because it allows them to think creatively and apply concepts in a new way that they then could talk through with the teacher or with fellow students as they're creating. It also gives them a chance to play around with concepts. So instead of hearing a video and being told, this is the 5 chord, they would actually be putting the 5 chord together or putting it on paper and showing that they understand that concept fully. In 8th grade, it gets a little more intense. Students are expected to improvise melodic embellishments. So this requires a very thorough knowledge of how to put chords and melodies together. A fun assignment to get the 8th eighth grade brains going would be to compare and contrast harmonies. So a way you could do this is you could provide a melody from a piece that's maybe a little bit later, more modern harmonies. You could use something by Claude Debussy or Maurice Ravel, one of the Impressionists, or really any of the modern composers. You could use something jazzy, something by Gershwin, or something by Stravinsky, anything like that. And then you could give the melody line alone, just the individual notes, to the students on a piece of paper notated. And you could tell them, okay, we are going to work out a set of harmonies that will accompany this. So students could go through that, put probably more simple chords like 1, 5, 4. Then you could have another worksheet prepared that shows the actual harmony that the composers chose, which very rarely is going to be those basic 1, 4, and 5 chords, right? So the students can look, compare, see how different those are as music history has progressed and harmonies have progressed. Understand kind of the more creative side that the composers were choosing and really see that difference and soak it in. Obviously, that's just a review of what's already been covered, right, in 6th and 7th grade. So for 8th grade, we're moving into embellished melody lines. And something very similar could be done with that, where you would take very simple melody lines, ask the student to embellish it, and then show them a real-life modern example where the melody isn't so clean cut. That could be really helpful for 8th graders. So in 6th and 7th grade, you're really laying the groundwork, but in 8th grade, you can play around with it. Show them more examples, make sure that they're seeing it applied and real on paper and also in their ear, giving them lots of chances to understand exactly what's going on in the music that they hear and that we study in class. This should be a really exciting time for 8th grade music students.